You notice I don't have no paper in front of me, and so everything I say comes from my heart. So I always say, when you speak from the heart, it's the truth. You know, when it comes to speaking about our legacy, you know, it's sometimes I get emotional, and I like to think that I'm well seasoned because I've spoken about it so often. But you know, but when you touch yourself, you know, and talk about yourself, it gets a little emotional sometimes. So you have to forgive me if I choke up. I remember one day when I was walking down, going to school in Dauphin, trying to scratch the redness and the skin, you know, change the color of my skin. I could say that Canada almost succeeded in changing me. We are called pagans, uncivilized, savages, and we were beaten because of that. We're abused because we could not speak English. If you're not taught love, how are you going to give love? You know, like we never had the nurturing of a parent. Like when you're just a number, you know, you become a perfectionist. You're angry at everything. You know, sadly to say, I used to feel better the further my children were away from me. That's how I was. But I didn't know any better. I didn't realize that it was wrong the way I was treating my children until I went and dealt with myself. You know, and so it was a very, very emotional, hard time for me to go back to my children and tell them, I'm sorry, I love you, I should have did it this way, I should have did it that way. You know, so people don't realize the damage it did to us. You know, people don't realize what Canada was trying to do, take the Union out of us. But the whole thing started way back in the early 1930s, when Governor Scott said that the only way to get rid of the Indian problem was to take the children away from the parents. My first year, I went to school on a reserve, and all I could speak was native tongue, native. And every time I spoke, I had to go up in front and stick my tongue out, and they'd pinch my tongue and pull it until I bled. And I had to go and stand up in the corner for the longest time. And then I had to write on the wall, I will never speak Indian again. I will never speak Indian again. 100 lines, I think it was. I remember that, as small as I was. I got strapped. You know, strapping, you know, after a couple of whacks, you just feel warm. You don't feel the pain anymore, you know. You know, and so I went through that, and I've always said, I don't care which way you cut it. When you take us away from our parents, our community, and our culture, you are ultimately responsible for our well-being, our livelihood. And you know what Canada said? Oh, we didn't own that building. We didn't own that institution. So we're not responsible for what happened to you in there. Well, you took us away against our will, and you put us over there against our will. We didn't own, you know. But they still had their agenda. You know, take the Indian out of that child.
My name is Garry McLean. I'm originally from Lake Manitoba First Nation. My dad was a residential school product. My mom wasn't. That was a saving grace. I say that was a saving grace on my part. But the school, I mean, the first day of school, I got a strap for speaking my language. I got a strap for speaking my language. And that had continued until, probably till about Christmas. I got a strap every day for speaking my language, but that's the only language I knew. I got 2 lickings that day, actually, the first day of school. One from the priest and one from my dad. Because my dad's belief was, you go to school, you listen to whatever those teachers say. Doesn't matter, you listen. And actually my life changed in 1958 because I had to go to the white school next, which is Ericstill. And then, but the first day of school, again by noon, I got a strap from this white teacher. And all the nuns in my community were white. They were all white. And the priests were white too. So everybody we knew that did wrong to us was white, at least to me and my colleagues. In that school, there was 36, 37 of us kids, and all of us were treated the same way. We could not speak our language. Our parents could not come to the schoolyard. There was a gate, there was a fence around the schoolyard. Our parents could not go beyond that gate for no reason, for whatever reason. They were not allowed, and so we were totally controlled by the nuns. So of course the abuse, and I learned to pray very, very early. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, and all the prayers in between. I mean, I don't regret that. I mean, I still do that today, thank God. But I mean, it was the abuse that I didn't know how to handle, and I took that with me into my life. Like I'm a recovering alcoholic, and like I started drinking as I was 14, but that was the way to take that pain away. I also got abused by one of the nuns, and that's true when they say if you eat an apple a day, you never get sick. Because I got an apple a day for not to tell anybody that this nun was abusing me. And by the time when I did tell my mom that this nun was abusing me sexually, she did not believe me. She was so orientated into the Roman Catholic. The nuns were angels. That's how orientated she was. Not just her, but many of the people.
Every parent.
And many other parents in the community. So it just, I mean, I make fun of that today. I mean, I got an apple a day, I never got sick. I got taught by sex by an angel, so how could that go wrong? You know, it's just, but I mean, in one sense, that was, for a while, that was the only way I knew how to cover the pain. I didn't know anything else. You know, like, I mean, I know today, and I've known for a long time, that it wasn't my fault. Like, how could it be my fault? I'm 11 years old, and this 26-year-old lady tells you to drop your pants and places your thing and makes it hard and takes off her clothes and say you gotta do it this way. You know, those are traumatic times. But somehow I got over those. And of course, by the time I was 14, I mean, somebody gave me some homemade brew. It was good stuff. No smell, yeah. But I mean, but by get that, it took the pain away. Like I didn't have to be afraid. I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I didn't have to be afraid to get a strap. And by the time, when I was 14 years old, I went to high school. I went to grade 9 in Ericstill. And that's when I learned I was different. I learned I was a savage. I learned I was a wagon burner. I learned I was a spear chucker. And then and even that are 60 years old, you probably didn't have an Indian in your classroom. Because we were locked up in residential schools, or we were locked up in the reserve because we weren't allowed to go to public schools. But I did go back to school after I dropped out of grade 9. I went back to, in 1970, I went back to Cinnabon Community College as an upgrading kid. And I got upgraded there, and I took social service course. But even at that time, my friend, so the counselor, a white counselor, said, because I wanted to go to medicine. But in his mind, he said, Indians do not become doctors. Indian boys like you do not become doctors or lawyers. You may have a shot at being a carpenter. You probably won't have a shot at being a plumber. And that's how these were human beings. These were counselors, white counselors, telling me that. And I'm sure they took many other kids. They told them the same thing. So But I went against the grain. I became a social worker in 1970, and I was the first graduate, and I was the first Anishinaabe guy to graduate at a college. And you know, so the mistreatment we got was really harsh. But at the same time, my dad was really strict. Like my dad didn't tell me, my dad didn't know what the word love meant, because he never got it. He was abusing. And my dad also abused my mom. Physically abused her, beat her up in front of us. Because, you know, like he didn't, I don't know why that, I don't know, I still don't know that, but that's, I've forgiven my parents for all of that stuff. So most of the people that were products of residential school didn't know how to parent. Didn't know how to parent. And the ones in my community, with the exception of one sister, all of my sisters got pregnant before they got married, because my mom did not believe in birth control, as the Roman Catholic Church didn't. So I mean, and then my generation, probably 50% of my generation still has that attitude too, in my community. And myself, people like myself, I'm still rejected from my community because I'm accused of thinking white, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. I don't know, you guys, maybe you guys can tell me. You know, those are all the things that happen. But the residential school is, in Manitoba, there's only 14 schools. There was 14 residential schools in Manitoba. And there's 50 other schools that were taught by one of the denominations, be it our Roman Catholic, be it United, be it the Protestant, Anglican, yeah, and of course the Mennonites fell in there somewhere too. We're not saying that's wrong. It just,
we're not holding it at fault either.
Yeah, no, we're not holding anybody at fault. It's just that the society, yeah, that's how it happened, and that's how our forefathers.
The government gave the direction.
Yeah, and it just, we didn't have no say. I mean, in Manitoba, we didn't vote until 1957. And Anishinaabe people were not allowed to vote until 1957. And in Canada, we weren't allowed to vote until after the Martin Luther King Revolution, the 60s. So I mean, we've only voted in the last 40 years, but it's also exciting times. It's exciting times for our kids. And I didn't marry an Anishinaabe woman because my mom told me I'm related to all Anishinaabe people. So in my head, I thought, I don't know where I read it somewhere in the books. If I marry a cousin or close relatives, my kids could be handicapped. So I wanted to be a dad. So I couldn't marry any of my cousins. So I married an English girl. And my daughter, like I have an English, my daughter is English and Ojibwe and Scottish and stuff like that. And my daughter is white and blonde. My granddaughter is even worse. Just kidding. No, she's white and she's got red hair. So you nobody can tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. Just look at my family. And I think, you know, and I think, but I think the kind of the excitement I share, like we now have lawyers. We now have 27 lawyers in this province, Anishinaabe lawyers. We have 17 doctors. We have lots of nurses, teachers. But I mean, that's how long it's taken to make that conversion. But at the same time, it's my job to teach my kid and my grandkids my language. The same way it's your job to teach your kids about Anishinaabe people. I mean, we're great people. And we know that, but we also know you're great people too. And we know that. And I think, but together, we'll mesh this. But the biggest thing we're doing now in the last 10 years is it's okay to be Anishinaabe. And the word Anishinaabe, the way it's explained to me over the years, is the word Anishinaabe means all people. It just doesn't mean Indian people or Aboriginal people. It's all people. The word Anishinaabe itself, that's what it means. But we have fun. We have fun, and we want you to have the same fun we have. And don't be afraid to ask us for guidance. You know, like any questions, I mean, ask us questions. 52% of our people are off the reserves in Manitoba. 52% of our people are off the reserve. So they're in here somewhere, they're taxpayers. And this myth about Indians get everything for nothing, I wish. I want it. But I think, you know, those are the kind of things that we need to share with, we need to talk about, and openly. Not to blame. Like, it's not, I mean, all of us Our forefathers were here. Our grandmothers were here. All of us. You know, like now it's up to us to educate our kids, our grandkids.
There's one gentleman that was crying to me, and he told me about he had to watch his brother drowning in the river, and the father wouldn't let him go after and try and save his brother. He just stood there and laughed, and he hung on to the brother, and he watched his brother drown.
And the father means the priest, not
yeah,
his
the priest.
His father. Yeah.
And so it was two brothers, like one brother
Yeah.
dived in for him. And the only time he let him go is after he knew he was gone. These are kind of things that happen, you know, and it's really horrific. And some people say, oh, it's impossible. It can't happen. Well, how did they know? They weren't in those closed walls that we were in, you know. And it has a long-lasting effect, like Garry is saying. We're all willing to forgive, live along with our non-Indian brothers and sisters. You know, we love yous, we forgive yous. We don't hold grudges. We don't blame yous, really, because we know that all these institutions that were set up and established, they got their marching orders from Canada. You do this and you do that. You civilize those Indians, those pagans. You know, so it was a constant uphill battle, and it still is today for us. I believe that Canada will come forward and do the right thing eventually.